Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan. These days, there's a lantern for every color of the rainbow, and even then some, with the emotional spectrum having long been busted wide open in the DC Multiverse. Almost makes you forget that at one point, there were only two types of power rings in existence, and before that, there was only one. Created by Martin Nodell and Bill Finger in 1940, drawing inspiration from a wide variety of mythologies and fables, Alan Scott's Green Lantern was more of a mysterious magician when he first debuted, rather than a prototype version of the Lantern Corps. And while many of his stories followed the explosion of the multiverse have been oriented towards sci-fi pursuits, that doesn't mean that his relationship to the mystic has all been forgotten. And with God of War Ragnarok out, we thought it would be no better time to explore the one time that Alan Scott became Surtur's Silver Surfer in the Dark Multiverse. Yes, you heard us loud and clear. So we're going to break down exactly how that happened. So without further ado, this is Dread Lantern's Origins Explored. However, before we go into our explanation, we have just a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is just a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, let's begin. Mystical flames are averse to wood. A brief introduction of Alan Scott's Green Lantern. All American Comics Volume 1, Issue number 16, opened with an explosive introduction to the iconic Green Lantern character, but we'd understand why any post-Hal Jordan GL fan would call his story a hearsay. After all, it involves a mystic green flame, ancient China, and most of all, no Guardians of the Universe. The story of the original Green Lantern goes a little something like this. Engineer Alan Scott and his friend Jimmy were traveling in a train on a bridge that Alan's company had created, when a bomb suddenly explodes, killing everyone on board except for Mr. Scott. Pulling himself out of the wreckage, Alan was beckoned by a mystic lamp to fashion a ring out of its metal to fulfill the prophecy of three. It told him that it should only flash with the green flame of life thrice, once to bring death, second to bring life, and third to grant power. In a flashback, it is revealed that the lamp Alan saw in front of his eyes had arrived on planet Earth 2,000 years ago as a green meteor. It landed in ancient China, where it was found by a sorcerer named Chang, who shaped it into a lamp. But the people of the village near the crash site didn't trust Chang, so they killed him, thus fulfilling the first prophecy. The lamp then traveled through the centuries, passing from one hand to another, including Kublai Kai's at one point, before landing in the hands of a mentally ill patient named Billings. Billings reshaped the lamp in the fashion of a train lantern, and the second prophecy was fulfilled. The lantern cures his mental illness. From there, this lantern somehow found its way into a specific bridge that Alan Scott and his friend were going to travel through, and having saved him with the green flame of life, the lantern proceeded to fulfill the third prophecy. It granted Alan power. Instructing him to create a ring from its mystic metal, the green flame informed Alan that as long as he recharged this ring every 24 hours, he could do pretty much anything he imagined with its power. Conjuring a colorful outfit for himself with some rather bold shade choices, Alan Scott took on the mantle of the Green Lantern and started fighting criminals in New York. You can see how many of the basic ideas that made the Green Lantern character famous were originated with Alan. The 24-hour charge period, the magical light constructs, the whole nine yards. Instead of being weak to the color yellow, the original Green Lantern was weaker against wood and anything rooted in nature, so seemingly mundane things like clubs would hurt him, where machine guns were simply child's play. Though we aren't sure if making the literal color yellow the weakness of the Green Lantern Corps was an improvement on the idea. Hilariously enough, when the two Green Lanterns, Alan Scott and Hal Jordan, meet each other after Salaz steals the Starheart, the villains use yellow wood to incapacitate both of them at the same time. But the thing is, Green Lantern was a decidedly more mystical character than a science fiction one. His origins are Aladdin-esque, and his early adventures were far more earthly. Heck, he even had his own sidekick in Streak the Wonder Dog. But by the time 1985 came around, even an Aeocentric retcon explaining Alan's powers and connection to the Guardians wasn't enough to keep him on the pages of the DC Comics, for the editor overlords had decided that the multiverse was so condensed into two parallel universes and decided to keep the Justice League in publication as opposed to the Justice Society. And this is where DC showed the comic world how something that feels like a stroke of genius at the time can come back to haunt them later. It all starts with one grievous deviation from the timeline. Tempus Fuginaut recalls the first crisis. DC Comics is infamous for having messed around with its timeline so much that currently they're having a follow-up crisis to the Dark Multiverse Crisis, which is supposed to be bigger than the Batman Who Laughs and Perpetua. Yeah, we're just as lost as you guys. But the New Frontier is not their first attempt at trying to streamline the hot mess of storylines that made their publication notorious. The first one came in the 1980s, and to be fair to them, it was a good one, when the Anti-Monitor appeared in the pages of the DC Comics and kicked off the Crisis on Infinite Earth storyline. The blueprint for mega crossovers like Endgame, the DC Multiverse, had as many Earths as the title of the Crisis issue suggested. It was a concentrated effort to get rid of all the parallel worlds and focus solely on telling good stories in a single creative universe where all their best ideas could live and thrive. They achieved this by having the Anti-Monitor essentially break the space-time continuum itself and uniting all the heroes of every major universe in the DC Multiverse, especially Earth 1 and Earth 2. Watching two Supermen gang up on a primordial cosmic entity is still some of the best comic book entertainment you will find anywhere in the world. But if the multiverse was to be compressed into a single new Earth, then one of the super teams needed to go. Because it wasn't like there were two versions of the Justice League fighting the Anti-Monitor, it was more like the Justice League and the Justice Society of America. The JLA, being more recent and more popular, was the team that was going to be staying into the new DC continuity. And so a way was needed to write out the JSA with the grace and respect that Golden Age heroes deserved. DC found that way with a one-shot comic called The Last Days of the Justice Society of America, which neatly resolved their storyline with a very convenient excuse. In that comic, the JSA is contacted by the Spectre after they hold the funerals for Robin and Huntress with dire news. Adolf Hitler had somehow managed to use the Spear of Destiny to rewrite the history of humanity and tie it to Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. Hitler's spell was cast in desperation to win World War II, and though the JSA was far removed from their glory days, they used the Spectre's help to travel back in time and prevent Hitler's spell from taking hold. Dr. Fate merged the heroes of the Society with the gods of Asgard in the latter's fabled fields. The fire giant Surtur rained ash and destruction upon that realm. After a lot of fighting, and we do mean a lot, the Society is able to kill Surtur. But because Ragnarok is conceptually an endless cycle, it just starts all over again and locks the heroes in an endless time loop in a limbo dimension. The only heroes to rejoin the new official continuity are Power Girl, Star-Spangled Kid, and Dr. Fate. Because of course he is. New Earth continues on under the protection of the Justice League, both being primarily remnants of Earth 1. But this is where things start to change in the Dark Multiverse. For them, it was Earth 2 that became the foundation for New Earth, not Earth 1. And it was the Justice League that went into Ragnarok, and not the Justice Society of America. Tempest Fugonaut relates to us that it was Kal-El, with an E, who saw a void where the planet had once been. And he was also the Kal-El to go to Alex Luthor's Paradise Dimension, with his Lois Lane and Superboy Prime. Because honestly, how can we let one of the best DC villains not have his origin story even in the Dark Multiverse? The new Earth that formed out of the Anti-Monitor's folly was the one where the JSA was old, and worse, unremembered. When Adolf Hitler uses the Spear of Destiny to tie Earth's fate to Ragnarok, the Justice League of America responded, but they died at the hands of the Executioner of Existence, Surtur the Fiery. But unlike the JSA from the Last Days one-shot, they lacked one crucial member, Dr. Fate. Without him present on the battlefield to resurrect the League and continue the eternal cycle of the Twilight of the Gods, there was no one to contain Surtur within Asgard. So when he destroyed Odin's first prized realm, he shifted his focus to the second, Midgard, also known as Earth. The small change of which Earth survived and which didn't changed the entire landscape of this particular world in the Dark Multiverse. And as the fire giant burst out, of the White House of all places, Tempest Fugonaut beckoned us to bear witness to the stand the old guard took to protect the new Earth. An endless Ragnarok for all the realms. Surtur meets the All-Star Squadron in Washington, D.C. Asgard's Bane arrived in Midgard, exuberant after his victory over his destined Acer foes. The additional blood of the Justice League no doubt served as a bonus meal for him, because when he burst through the White House, he wasted no time in dismantling the Secret Service. Surtur bent helicopters out of the sky and crushed tanks beneath his feet. Armed soldiers died screaming, as they too were set alight by Surtur's primordial fires, and the giant soon cut the Washington Monument in half with his fiery sword. He was about to make a second Asgard of New Earth when the All-Star Squadron arrived to take him down, led by the most prominent leader of the Justice League of America. Though aged and well beyond his prime, Alan Scott, also known as the Green Lantern, stepped up to the fire giant and yelled out his team's most recent accomplishments in defiance of his flames. Though New Earth was strange to them, the JSA and their allies had defended Earth 2 for decades, with all their heart and might, and it was a part of this new world as well. They had sent the Anti-Monitor, the worst known threat of existence at the time, packing like a mewing baby. So what made Surtur think that he could test the All-Star squad? The Fire Giant was appalled that a mortal, a Midgardian no less, would address him by name, and he was about to give Alan a piece of his mind, but he stopped when he saw the lantern symbol at his chest, and decided to take the psychological route instead. Surtur produced and burned the blood-soaked uniform of Hal Jordan from his primordial being, and taunted Alan with the fact that his younger and stronger counterpart had died, and then decided to rub salt in the wound by describing how much of a snack Hal's ring arm had been. He lists all the legends that lay dead at his feet, telling Alan that the only thing that changed was the fact that he would die stupid instead of wise. The Green Lantern then mourns his Earth 1 counterpart's loss, and reminds the Fire Giant that they knew of his coming. The League was the first line of defense, but they were not Earth's last grasp. As long as the All-Stars were around, they would keep putting down genocidal maniacs, just like they did during World War II. He proclaims to Surtur that as long as his friends and family were alive, they would keep fighting him, and the Fiery One replies by telling him that they would keep dying. With that, the Green Lantern sounds the attack, and the All-Stars charge the Fire Giant, but it becomes clear immediately that they have grossly underestimated the situation. Surtur cuts through Hawkman and Silver Scarab as if they were butter, and literally toys with Hawkgirl, asking her if she can sing in the middle of a life and death battle. Dr. Fate tries to rally She-Ra's spirit, seeing as she had lost her husband and son, but Surtur simply takes her mace and bashes Fate in the head with it, killing him and Nabu in one fell stroke. The Spectre emerges from Fate's helmet and looks to unleash the wrath of God on a defiler like Surtur, but the Fire Giant simply consumes the entity's head, leaving its massive corpse to crash to the earth. Robin dies when a Dyna Ring gives him the Gus Fring treatment, and Lita Trevor, also known as Fury, is about to die a flightless Valkyrie when her mother intervened. Surtur mocked Lita by calling Earth 1's Wonder Woman the younger and stronger one, and got his jaw broken by the Invisible Jet, courtesy of the Earth 2's Wonder Woman for it. Surtur gives her credit for weakening his jaw, but then unleashes a blast of primordial flame, so hot that it kills Nucleon upon contact, and fatally wounds Wonder Woman as well. Even Superman, with his Kryptonian physique, could feel the burn of Surtur's primordial fires. In her last moment, Diana reminds Clark that pain is rare for their kind, but they must not let it defeat them, as her body lay extinguished. Clark vowed that he would take down Surtur in honor of her memory, and that of their fallen comrades, of which there were plenty by now. And it looks like he was just about to rush into Surtur's arms with reckless abandon when Power Girl stepped in. In a parallel sacrifice to her Earth 1 counterpart, she convinces her cousin to live on, for if hope was to persist on Earth, that it could only do so through Superman. She then charges into Surtur, who gladly beats her down and assimilates her within his own being. Kara Zor-El's sacrifice that day may have robbed the world of yet another Kryptonian, but at least the squadron was able to make a getaway. Green Lantern's bold words to the Bane of Asgard and Bringer of Ragnarok ring hollow in the face of the massive swathes of death and destruction that Surtur and his armies were leaving in their wake. If Alan Scott was a less willful man, it might have shattered his spirit then and there. But the Green Lantern still had a lot of work left. He just didn't know it yet. Regroup and retry. The Justice Society of Earth. What's left of the All-Star Squadron retreats to a secure location, created by the combined powers of Thunderbolt and Starman. Everyone has been left broken by Surtur's attack. Superman is worried about whether Surtur can track them down or not, despite being protected by both science and magic. He is also blaming himself for Power Girl's last stand, despite Lois reminding him that it was her choice. Jay Garrick is realizing the full extent of what being the last Flash means. Hawkgirl, Fury, Obsidian, and Green Lantern mourn the loss of their loved ones, while Sandman reminisces about Sandy. Wildcat Stitches need stitches. Starman reminds them all that the people of New Earth are depending on them, as we get a cool shot of the JSA logo, having been changed to say Justice Society of Earth, courtesy of Cosmic Rod. He says that whatever might have happened on that day, they had survived a crisis, damn it, and they were survivors. Surtur was just another storm in their path. They will weather this, and weather it they did. Lois Lane managed to make Kal-El see that he was not to blame for anything that had taken place to a person's own volition. Sandman gives an epic monologue that reminds you just how eerily strong this character truly is, notwithstanding the Netflix show. Wildcat and Thunderbolt recall how they have always been the fists of the society, and Starman and the Flash come up with a possible plan to defeat Surtur. Arguing that he was like a walking sun, they decide to create a black hole within his body and burn him out, much like a sun. The pair joked about patents, and Starman realized just how many of their comrades they had lost when he said our man would have loved their work. Emphasis, of course, on would have. Huntress lifts Hawkgirl's spirit, and She-Ra embraces her own strength as Hawkwoman, and she also confirms Aquaman's allegiances while Fury takes on her mother's crown and becomes the new Wonder Woman. The last people we see are Green Lantern and his son Obsidian. Alan Scott never really knew it, but he was the father of 2 children, Obsidian and a female superhero called Jade. But the latter had died fighting Surtur, and Alan never knew either of them properly to begin with. He tries to apologize to Obsidian for this, saying he should have been there for them. But his son understands and says maybe not knowing he had a family eases his grief. He tells his father that he doesn't have to apologize because he can't save the world every time, and this seems to spark something in Alan. He says he led his family and friends into battle today, and he lost many of both. He tells Obsidian that he's right. He doesn't have to win every battle, just one. Despite not having spent a considerable amount of time with his son, Alan Scott knows his pain, and so he has him only promise one thing in return. Obsidian will live his life and light to the fullest, because he was going to make sure that there was a world where he could live out his days. From the way he charged up his power ring, it seemed like the Green Lantern was readying himself for a final heroic sacrifice. But, as you will see now, the sacrifice he made was anything but. In fact, it was perhaps the most selfish thing Alan Scott's character has ever done. Surtur's last stand, the fall of life, and the rise of the Dread Lantern. Surtur was about to cross an ocean to go destroy another continent with his fire demons, when the very ocean parted beneath his feet, as if Moses had come again to exact divine justice from him. Turns out it was just Aquaman, and with the parting of the ocean, he also drowned most of Surtur's army. The Justice League of Society presented a united front to the fire giant of Muspelheim, and miraculously enough, everything seemed to be going according to plan for once. Surtur taunted them after their last defeat, asking them who would dare to strike him now. He got his answer from the new Wonder Woman, as Hippolyta Trevor burst at him with renewed fury. Obsidian flies in above him, trying to smother his fiery light with his own command over shadows. Wildcat is going berserk on fire demons with custom-made mitts, thanks to the Green Lantern himself, and Thunderbolt unlocks a new level of friendship with his genie that gives him a Megazord form. Sandman sacrifices himself trying to take down the fiery demons, but as Hawkwoman points out, they keep spawning from the very ash that falls from Surtur's body. Aquaman has a more elegant solution to this problem: liquid nitrogen. That, and a few massive sharks that he sends chomping away at the Bane of Asgard. Surtur's fiery body burns away their mortal flesh, of course, but the flesh of a Kryptonian is as close to a god as anything else. And that is what sends him reeling when Power Girl bursts out of his belly. Superman thanks Krypton that Kara is safe, and Starman gives Jay Garrick the signal to implement their final plan. Alan Scott uses every drop of strength and will to hold Surtur in place, as the Flash whips up a temporal storm of cosmic proportions around them. Starman activates his cosmic rod, and plans start to work. Surtur is held in place as dozens of black holes start forming around his body. Green Lantern calls out to Starman to hold fast, but he himself did not do a good job of securing his mark. With one swing of his fiery sword, Surtur cleaves the Flash in two, ending any hope for a sustainable black hole being created on his own body. Alan Scott desperately cries out to Starman that they can still do this, but Surtur goes for him next, leaving him bisected as well. He tells the Justice Society of Earth that if they prefer his bowels so much, they can have them, as primordial magma flows out of his body, burning Wildcat, Aquaman, and Thunderbolt to death. This is what breaks the final straw for the aging Kal-El, who decides that if he must go out as an old man, he would do it with a bang. He freezes Surtur's face with his ice breath, and then punches him so hard that he breaks the Iron Giant's face, but age catches up with him, just as Surtur's hand does. Clenched in the fist of the Bringer of Ragnarok, Clark is asked how he would prefer to die, as Surtur's loincloth, or as a living feast for his demons, with Lois as their spectator. Before he can torture Supes any further though, Alan Scott yells out that that's enough! Now, because you're watching this on a video and not reading the actual comic, which is the way you totally should be, by the way, you'd think that Alan had called upon the entire power of Starheart to make a final self-sacrificial stand to defeat Surtur and preserve hope for the world by saving Superman, right? Right? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are sorry to inform you that you could not be more wrong. Alan Scott did offer himself up for a sacrifice to the fire giant, but not in battle, rather as a herald. Desperate for an end to the fight, the Green Lantern gives up fighting and chooses to appease his all-powerful opponent. He first asks Surtur to state his deepest desire to him, knowing that having spent centuries in imprisonment must have left him surely deprived of something that he could use as a bargaining chip. But Surtur was created for one primal purpose, and that was destruction. It was all he ever wanted and craved from his lifespan. And so, Alan Scott made a deal with the Fire Devil himself. He had already lost a daughter and many of his close, cherished friends to this senseless new war. He could fight no more. In his exhausted and mentally defeated state, Alan Scott offered himself to Surtur in exchange for him sparing Earth. Not as a death sacrifice, but as a herald. He told the fire giant that as long as he spared Earth, he himself would serve as his avatar, leading his armies and him across the starways, discovering if the cosmic space truly was endless. Surtur is overjoyed at the prospect of feasting on Scott's dignity for the rest of eternity, and he agreed to the deal as the JSE stood underneath them, dumbfounded by Alan's suggestion. Surtur loosed his primordial flame upon the Green Lantern, but instead of killing him, it combined with him and made him something more. Alan Scott didn't even get to finish his tearful farewell to his son Obsidian, for whom he had done all this in truth, before his new master dragged him away to his duty. Although Obsidian was broken up about his dad's departing, New Earth in the Dark Multiverse survived. Sure, it was the Earth 2 version and not the Earth 1, and most of the heroes were now replaced by their heirs, unless of course they were already experiencing old age. But whilst across the universe, trillions upon trillions died at the hands of Surtur's army. Ragnarok was brought upon realm after realm, again and again, and countless lives were lost to spare the fate of a single realm in the cradle of the universe. Tempest Fugonaut reminds us that the new Earth would live, yes, but at what cost? DC's universes, unlike ours, were confirmed to be teeming with sentient life, and as such, no person had the right to take it away from them. No more than murder should be an acceptable thing in our society, and yet trillions upon trillions lost their lives due to the terrible oath of the man once known as Alan Scott, and entire solar systems were laid waste by Surtur and his Dread Lantern. Marvelous verdict. And I shall shed my light over dark evil, for the dark things cannot stand the light of the Green Lantern. It doesn't sound as catchy as the one that the Silver Age introduced. But this was the first Green Lantern's oath that Alan Scott took when he received his mystical powers. After becoming the Fire Giant's Herald of Destruction, he changed it to say this: "And I shall shed my light for fiery evil, for death alone survives the light of the Dread Lantern." Not only is this an inversion to his original oath, it is a perversion of it as well. The green flame of life, as the name might suggest, is representative of all living things, just as the Green Lantern Corps is a representation of the concept of willpower. To say that he has shed his light in service of fiery evil is a direct retelling of what transpired between Alan and Surtur before the former became the latter's Silver Surfer. Green Lantern willingly abandoned his light in service of the fiery evil Surtur and his armies just to ensure Earth's safety. This oath goes on to say that death alone can survive the light of the Dread Lantern, equating his own powers with the exact opposite of what they were supposed to be. Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Crisis on Infinite Earths was a bit of a rushed read from an objective standpoint, sure, but it also gave us a perfect example of how far one man is willing to go to protect his family. In trying to give his son the future that he would have lost to Surtur's flames, the Dread Lantern extinguished the lives of trillions across millions of galaxies. And while we do get it that he did it out of love, knowing that many people were killed held the same love he did for his own children, well, we have a question. Was it all worth it? What do you think? Let us know in the comment section below. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of Marvelous Videos. If you enjoyed our content, then please give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, I'm Rylan. Have a good one and be safe.